All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive into something that I think is on a lot of people's minds these days, and that is long-term food storage.
Right.
We've got some interesting sources for this deep dive. We've got some articles from people who are interested in homesteading.
Yeah.
We've got some survivalist websites. And believe it or not, we even found some resources that are meant for restaurants.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because they really had to be on top of
Yeah, they know how to store food.
food storage.
That's right.
So our mission today is to kind of give you the information that will help you make some good choices about your own food storage. So first things first, why even bother?
Yeah, why do we even care?
Why should we even care about this?
Yeah.
A lot of the sources seem to agree on some key points. One of them is natural disasters.
Right.
Think about what happens if there's a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake or something like that.
Yeah.
And suddenly you can't just go to the grocery store.
Exactly.
Another one is economic uncertainty. What if something happens and the economy takes a downturn and you're not able to work, something like that, and maybe prices go way up and it's not as easy to get food. And then there's things like pandemics.
Oh, yeah.
We all just lived through that not too long ago.
Yeah.
And suddenly the grocery store is not an option.
It's a very different world, right?
Yeah. So it seems like there's a lot of good reasons to maybe think about having some extra food on hand.
What I think is interesting is that it kind of goes beyond just these, very extreme scenarios.
Yeah.
It's also about, I think, resilience and self-sufficiency.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I think that really ties into some larger trends that we're seeing, like sustainability and trying to reduce food waste. Just having a little bit more control over where your food comes from and, having that peace of mind like we were talking about.
Absolutely. So we're all on board now, right?
Let's do it.
We all want to have some extra food.
Okay.
So what are we talking about? What kind of foods last a long time?
Yeah. What are we stockpiling here?
Yeah. I was reading one of the articles and it mentions honey.
Honey?
That was found in Egyptian pyramids. Wow. That was still edible after 3,000 years.
3,000 years.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So honey, it can last a really long time.
So honey is amazing, right? If you store it properly, it can last indefinitely.
Wow.
It might crystallize over time, but you can just heat it up a little bit.
Oh, okay.
And it'll go right back to normal.
So it doesn't actually go bad?
It doesn't go bad. It's just science.
Wow.
Honey has a very low moisture content.
Okay.
And it's made up of these really stable compounds that make it super resistant to spoilage.
So it's not just any honey off the shelf.
Right.
Like how it's processed and stored matters.
You got it.
Okay.
Locally sourced honey, for example, often has a higher moisture content.
Oh, really?
Because it hasn't been processed as much.
Interesting.
And that can affect its shelf life compared to the commercial stuff.
Okay, so that's a good point, I guess. I got to think about where I'm getting my honey from.
Yeah, the source matter.
Another thing that surprised me was plain white rice.
Oh, yeah.
If you store it correctly, apparently it can last indefinitely, too.
Forever rice.
Yeah, forever rice.
I'm into it.
And then there's this thing called hardtack, which I'd never even heard of before.
Hardtack? What is that?
Well, it was the go-to food for sailors way back in the day.
Oh, wow.
It's basically just flour, water, and salt.
Good.
And then you bake it into this rock-hard biscuit.
Oh, my gosh.
And apparently that stuff can last forever.
So they're like survival biscuits.
Yeah, basically survival biscuits.
I mean, it doesn't sound very tasty.
I don't think it was about taste.
It was about calories.
Yeah, it was just about getting the calories in to survive.
Yeah, just to get by.
But you don't have to limit yourself to honey and hardtack and white rice.
No.
There's tons of other long-lasting options out there.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more.
Dried beans.
Right.
Pasca. Even freeze-dried cheese.
Freeze-dried cheese.
Imagine having cheese around for 10 or 20 years.
Wow. Okay, so you're talking about like decades.
Yeah, decades.
Yeah.
But when I think about food storage, I kind of picture like a pantry just overflowing with cans.
Right, yeah.
Is that really the only way to do it?
I mean, it's definitely a classic, right?
Yeah.
But our sources actually talk about some pretty interesting alternatives.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Have you ever heard of a root cellar?
Yeah, that's like an old-fashioned way to keep fruits and vegetables fresh, right?
Exactly. It's this cool, humid space, usually underground. And what it does is it really slows down the ripening process. Oh, wow.
So fruits and veggies can stay fresh for months in there.
So this is like pre-refrigeration.
Yeah, this is old school.
Wow.
Of course, it's not for everyone.
Right.
You need some space.
Yeah. You're not going to have a root cellar in an apartment.
Probably not.
So what about something a little more DIY?
Okay.
Like, could I dry food at home?
You're thinking like a true prepper now.
I know.
That's awesome.
Dehydrating is a great way to preserve food at home.
It is.
Right.
You control the quality. You can dry all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Fruits, veggies, even meat.
That's a good point.
Think about dried oranges. They can last for years.
Wow.
Yeah.
I could get behind that.
Right.
So speaking of doing things at home, what about fermenting?
Oh.
Like kimchi.
Kimchi's delicious.
I love kimchi.
Sauerkraut.
Yes, sauerkraut. All those things last a really long time.
They do.
But is that considered long-term storage?
I mean, it definitely can be.
Okay.
Fermenting is all about using good bacteria to preserve food.
Right. And it actually makes it more nutritious.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing.
It's not just extending the shelf life. You're actually getting this boost probiotics, too.
It's good for your gut.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got all this food stored away.
Yeah.
How do we make sure it stays good for years and years?
Okay, so storage is key, right? Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of talk about airtight containers and something called Mylar bags.
What are Mylar bags?
Okay, so Mylar bags...
I've heard of them.
Yeah, these are like serious business when it comes to long-term food storage.
Oh, wow.
Think of them as like a super tough metallized plastic bag that doesn't let anything in or out, especially air.
Oh, so like vacuum sealing.
It's kind of like vacuum sealing, but even better.
Okay.
And that's where oxygen absorbers come in.
Wait, so you literally suck the oxygen out of the bag?
You got it.
I've heard of like serious preppers doing that, but I never really thought about why.
It's all about eliminating oxygen, which is the enemy of long-term storage.
Huh.
Oxygen causes food to spoil.
Elsewhere.
Removing it can dramatically increase shelf life, especially for things like grains, dried beans, even powdered milk.
So you're talking like decades.
Oh, yeah. Combine Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. You're talking about storing food for decades.
Wow, that's impressive.
Right.
But for everyday storage,
yeah,
can I stick with my regular containers?
I mean, as long as they're airtight and food grade, you're good to go.
Okay.
Glass jars are great, and good quality plastic containers work too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All this talk about long-term storage has me thinking about my current pantry situation, which is a bit of a disaster zone.
I feel that.
I'm definitely guilty of having some mystery containers in the back.
We've all been there.
Any tips on how to stay organized?
Organization is key.
Okay.
Think about it in an emergency. You don't want to be digging through a mountain of unlabeled containers.
Right.
You need to know exactly what you have and where it is.
That makes sense.
So label everything clearly with the date and what's inside.
So future me will thank me later.
Trust me, future you will thank you for it.
It's a good point.
And don't forget about food rotation.
Oh, right.
Our sources talk about something called FIFO first, in first out.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Basically, you always use the oldest items first.
Right.
And replace them with newer ones.
Okay.
It keeps things fresh and it prevents waste.
All right, so I'm labeling everything.
Label it.
I'm rotating my stock.
Rotate.
Anything else I should keep in mind?
The basics are super important.
Okay.
Keep your food in a cool, dry, and dark place.
Oh, okay.
Heat, moisture, and light.
Okay.
They can all contribute to spoilage.
Got it.
So you want to create a stable environment for your stockpile.
Right.
Think of it like a time capsule for your food.
Time capsule it is.
There you go.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of like the basics here.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of curious to know more about like specific foods and how to store them best.
Sure.
Like I've heard about canning and freeze drying, but I have no idea where to even begin.
There's a whole world of food preservation techniques out there.
Right.
And our sources go into some of the more advanced methods.
Okay.
Canning is a classic, and it's still a very reliable way to preserve fruits, vegetables, and even meats.
I've always been a little intimidated by canning, to be honest.
Really?
It seems like you need like all this specialized equipment and a degree in chemistry.
I mean, it's definitely a more involved process.
Yeah.
But it's not as complicated as you might think.
Okay.
There are tons of resources available to help you get started.
Okay.
And once you get the hang of it, it can be really rewarding.
Oh.
There's something very satisfying about filling your pantry with jars of homemade preserves.
That's true.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like a little victory.
What about freeze drying?
Oh, freeze drying.
I've heard that's a good way to preserve food without losing the nutrients and the flavor.
Freeze drying is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It basically removes all the moisture from food.
Oh, wow.
Leaving you with this lightweight, shelf-stable product that retains most of its original taste and nutritional value.
Wow.
It's a bit more high-tech than canning, but it's becoming increasingly popular for home use.
Well, so we've got canning, freeze drying. What else is out there?
So many options.
What about those sprouts you mentioned?
Ah, yes. Sprouting.
Okay.
This is a fantastic way to get fresh, nutrient-packed greens, even when you're stuck indoors. Basically, you take dried beans or seeds, soak them in water, allow them to germinate, and grow these little sprouts. It's super easy, and it's a great way to add some life to your emergency food supply.
So it's like you're gardening, but indoors.
Yeah, exactly. It's like indoor gardening.
You know, this deep dive has really changed the way I think about food storage.
Really?
I always thought it was just about, like, prepping for the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
But it's about so much more than that. It could actually save you money.
Yeah.
And reduce waste in the long run.
Exactly.
And like you were saying before, there's that sense of empowerment, too.
Absolutely.
Knowing that you can take care of yourself and your family.
Yeah, there's like a real sense of security and peace of mind that comes with it.
I love that.
Yeah.
This whole deep dive has really opened my eyes to the possibilities.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And you know what? There's a whole community of people out there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was like a whole community.
Oh, yeah. There are people who are super passionate about this stuff.
Wow.
They share tips, recipes. They support each other.
That's great.
In their journey toward food independence.
That's so cool.
It's really inspiring.
It's like a whole hidden world of knowledge and skills.
Exactly.
That we've kind of lost touch with.
And it's a world worth rediscovering.
It is.
But for now, I think we've given our listener plenty to chew on.
We have covered a lot of ground. But hey, before we go any further, I'm curious, what's one item you're thinking of adding to your stockpile this week?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm feeling inspired to try some more advanced storage techniques.
Okay.
Maybe I'll get some Mylar bags and try my hand at packaging some dried beans.
Well, that's a good idea.
Dried beans are a true pantry staple.
They are.
What about you? What's going on in your stockpile?
You know, I'm thinking about getting a dehydrator.
Oh, nice.
I love dried fruit.
Yeah.
And it would be great to have like a healthy snack option on hand that lasts for ages.
That's a great idea.
Okay, those both sound amazing. I can't wait to get started.
Me too. This is going to be fun.
I'm excited about this.
All right, let's do it. I think one of the coolest things about all this is, you know, even if like a major disaster never happens, having a well-stocked pantry just makes life so much easier.
That's true.
You know, no more last-minute runs to the store. Yeah. No worrying about running out of the basics.
Right.
It's like having a safety net for your food supply.
Yeah, it's like peace of mind.
Exactly.
Speaking of peace of mind.
Yeah.
Let's talk about food safety for a second.
Okay.
I was reading about how commercial kitchens handle food storage.
Oh, yeah.
And there's some pretty strict rules.
Oh, absolutely. Those kitchens are all about safety and efficiency.
Yeah.
One thing that caught my eye was this rule from the FDA Food Code.
Oh.
All food has to be stored at least 6 inches off the floor.
6 inches? Really? Why is that so important?
Well, think about it. It's all about pest control and sanitation.
Oh, okay.
Keeping food elevated reduces the risk of contamination from insects and rodents.
That makes sense. I never would have thought of that.
It seems like a small detail, but it makes a big difference in keeping things clean and safe.
So it's not just about keeping the critters out.
Right.
It's about preventing foodborne illnesses, too.
Really good set.
And I bet there are other things we can learn from commercial kitchens.
Oh, definitely.
Like they must have a whole system down.
They do.
For temperature control in organization.
Yeah.
And keeping everything spotless.
Oh, yeah, they have to.
So we can apply those same principles to our home storage.
Absolutely.
Even if we're not running a restaurant.
Right. It's all about adapting those best practices.
Okay, so we've covered the why and the what of long-term food storage.
Right.
But now I'm really curious about the how.
And how.
The actual techniques for preserving different types of food.
Yeah, how do we actually do this?
Yeah, where do we even begin?
Well, our sources delve into some pretty fascinating methods.
Okay.
Canning, for example, has been around for centuries. And it's still a reliable way to preserve fruits, vegetables, and even meats.
I've always been a little intimidated by canning, to be honest.
Really? Why is that?
It just seems like you need all this specialized equipment and like a degree in chemistry.
I mean, it's definitely a more involved process.
Yeah.
But it's not as complicated as you might think.
Okay.
There are tons of resources available to help you get started.
Okay, so maybe I could give it a try.
Yeah. And once you get the hang of it, it can be really rewarding.
Okay.
There's something very satisfying about filling your pantry with jars of homemade preserves.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like a little victory.
What about freeze drying?
Oh, freeze drying.
I've heard that's a great way to preserve food without losing the nutrients and the flavor.
Freeze drying is pretty amazing.
Right.
It basically removes all the moisture from food.
Oh, wow.
Leaving you with this lightweight, shelf-stable product that retains most of its original taste and nutritional value.
Wow. So it's like the best of both worlds.
Yeah. You get the convenience of shelf-stable food, but you don't have to sacrifice the flavor or the nutrients.
That's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. It's a bit more high-tech than canning.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it's becoming increasingly popular for home use.
Interesting.
So we've got canning, freeze drying. What else is out there?
What about those sprouts you mentioned?
Yes, sprouting.
Oh.
This is a fantastic way to get fresh, nutrient-packed greens, even when you're stuck indoors.
Even when you can't go outside and garden.
Exactly, even when you can't garden.
Okay.
Basically, you take dried beans or seeds, soak them in water, allow them to germinate and grow these little sprouts.
Oh, that's cool.
It's super easy.
Okay.
And it's a great way to add some life to your emergency food supply.
You know, this deep dive has really changed the way I think about food storage.
Oh, yeah. How so?
I always thought it was just about survival.
Right.
Like prepping for the worst case scenario.
Yeah, just in case something bad happens.
But it's about so much more than that.
It is.
It's about having a connection to your food.
That's a good point.
And taking control of your own well-being.
Absolutely.
Like you said, it could save you money.
Yeah.
Reduce waste. And there's that sense of empowerment, too.
I couldn't agree more.
Knowing that you can take care of yourself and your family no matter what happens.
There's a real sense of security and peace of mind that comes with it.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
This whole deep dive has really opened my eyes to the possibilities.
I'm glad to hear that.
And there's a whole community of people out there.
There is.
Who are passionate about this stuff.
Oh, yeah. There's a whole community.
I didn't realize that.
They share tips, recipes.
Yeah.
They support each other in their journey toward food independence.
That's amazing. It's like a whole hidden world of knowledge and skills that we've kind of lost touch with.
Exactly.
It's really inspiring.
It's a world worth rediscovering.
It is.
But for now, I think we've given our listeners plenty to chew on.
We have covered a lot of ground.
Oh, yeah.
But hey, before we wrap things up, I have one last question for you and for our listener.
All right, shoot.
What's the most surprising thing you learned about long-term food storage today?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
You know, I think what surprised me the most is the sheer variety of foods you can store and the different techniques you can use. It's not just about stacking cans in your basement anymore.
Yeah.
There's a whole world of options out there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think for me, the biggest surprise was the connection to sustainability and reducing food waste.
Right.
I never really thought about long-term food storage in that context before.
It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
Especially in today's world where food security is becoming more and more important.
Well said. I think we've given our listeners a lot to consider.
We have.
But hey, before we officially sign off,
Yeah.
any final words of wisdom for folks who are just starting their food storage journey?
My advice would be to start small.
Okay.
And don't get overwhelmed.
Don't try to do everything at once.
Exactly.
Yep.
Pick a few essential items that you know you'll use.
Right.
And find a storage method that works for you.
Okay.
Remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
And remember, knowledge is power.
Yes.
The more you learn about food storage, the more confident and prepared you'll feel.
Exactly. And who knows, you might even discover a new passion along the way.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So on that note of empowerment and delicious possibilities,
I love it.
We're going to wrap up this deep dive into long-term food storage.
Sounds good.
It's funny. You know, when I first thought about doing a deep dive on food storage, I pictured like a basement with like stacks of cans, you know?
Yeah, like the classic prepper image.
Right. Like maybe a dusty bag of rice somewhere.
Oh, right.
But this is so much more interesting.
Yeah, it really is. It's like this whole world of practical knowledge that's also tied to history and culture and even science.
Yeah, I love that. And it's something anyone can do.
Yeah, anyone can do this.
You don't need a bunker. You know, you don't have to go crazy.
Just a little bit of knowledge and planning.
Speaking of planning,
I
think it's important to remember that building a food stockpile isn't a one-time event.
That's true.
It's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
So it's not about just like stocking up and forgetting about it.
You got to stay on top of it.
You need to check your supplies regularly.
Yeah.
Rotate your stock. Make sure everything is still in good condition.
Exactly. And as your needs change,
right,
your stockpile should evolve too.
That's a good point.
Maybe you start with the basics,
Yeah.
but then you get into gardening and you want to preserve your harvest.
Right.
Or maybe you discover a new recipe that uses a long-lasting ingredient you never considered before.
It's like this journey of exploration.
It is.
Constantly learning and adapting.
And there's always something new to discover.
That's what makes it so fascinating.
The more you delve into this world of food storage, the more you realize how much there is to learn.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a pretty good starting point.
Yeah, I think so.
We've explored the why, the what, and the how of long-term food storage.
We covered a lot of ground.
But this is just the beginning.
It is just the beginning.
There's so much more to explore.
Absolutely.
There's a wealth of information out there. From homesteading blogs to online forums to even the FDA food code.
You can actually find that online.
Really?
Yeah, it's publicly available.
Wow. So we encourage everyone to keep exploring.
Yes.
Keep learning and keep building that stockpile.
I love it.
And, even if you never have to use your stockpile in an emergency,
right,
just having that extra food on hand gives you that sense of security.
It does.
Peace of mind.
It's like a safety net.
It is.
It's about being prepared, being resourceful, and knowing that you can take care of yourself and your loved ones.
I love that.
Yeah.
So on that note of empowerment and delicious possibilities,
I love it.
We're going to wrap up this deep dive into long-term food storage.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us.
And keep those pantries stocked.
Yes, keep learning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep those pantries stocked.
Absolutely.
We'll catch you next time for another deep dive into a brand new topic. Until then, stay curious.